So when a system is running efficiently, you'll see all of these cups of water working together in a coordinated way. What that means is the county jail may be running at capacity a lot, and that's okay because theoretically, you should be able to move people and divert them from the jail into other more appropriate options when possible. That might be you move some folks experiencing homelessness with a low level of misdemeanor crime, for instance, say back into shelter while they're awaiting outcome of their trial or their work with the court. They might go into treatment programs when they need them for drugs or alcohol particularly. They might go into other outpatient programs as well if that's appropriate for them. But you can kind of see how everything sort of flows together. And when it's working well, it means they're coordinating with each other. The jail coordinates with the shelters, coordinates with the treatment providers, who coordinate with other housing options here. And so a lot of times what will happen is residential treatment, for instance, will move folks from inpatient or residential to outpatient, and sometimes they'll finish and go into regular housing somewhere in the community, and you can see how it opens up capacity throughout. You don't have to have a lot of beds in all these areas, but you need people to flow through them efficiently to an end result of housing. However, today we're not looking at a system that's really efficient or that has the capacity. What we see today more often than not is that our jail is full, and it has been full for a number of years. And when they try and move people out of the jail, for instance, into other options like shelter, the shelters are actually full. So they're trying to figure out, can I get them into other treatment options? Yes, we've been able to do that to a large extent, residential treatment, and maybe even some outpatient treatment. But what happens is the jail keeps filling up. And so as the jail keeps dumping people forward and people keep moving through the system, they keep running into this at the very end. There's just no capacity. Pretty sure they're full. Pretty soon, residential treatment is full. And the jail keeps trying to find places for people in shelter. And you can see what happens is you start having a little bit of splashover and people not being able to find a place in any of these cups. And what's happened with the jail today is that they literally don't have room anymore. So they have to release people most days during the year just for overcrowding. And there may not be a place for them to go. So they end up on the street. What's worse sometimes is that people keep looking for shelter and there's no shelter availability. So they end up on the street. And it keeps on going down the line. Residential treatment can't actually discharge people into other treatment because there's no other options. So right now today, Salt Lake County residential treatment has a length of stay of twice, sometimes 3 times what they'd like it to be because there's no place to discharge to. And on down the line. On the housing front, we know that through the Kempsey Gardner Institute, the best knowledge we have right now is that for every one housing unit at 30% median income or below, that means for a family of 4, it's about $30,000 a year, or a single individual at $12,000 a year. For every one apartment available at that price range, there's 100 people looking for it. 1 to 100 right now. Big deficit. On the permanent supportive housing side, Salt Lake County looked at their supportive housing needs, and they estimated this year with their county bond that they needed about 1,000 additional housing units to meet the current need. We're full there. You can see how that means everywhere back up. The emergency shelters have been running at full for 2 years, 96% capacity and above. So for a number of years now, this is sort of what it looks like. And this is what it feels like. Especially on the housing end. If you've looked for housing, you know how frustrating it can be and how messy it looks like. So when you come to a city like Salt Lake City and you see people who are struggling to find their place, it's not just that people don't want help. Sometimes it's that there's not capacity anywhere. And we talked about capacity being a big part of the systems. The other piece is about coordination. And you can see how coordination is critical, but right now even the coordination won't overcome the capacity problems. A couple of examples here. Talked about there's not enough housing in the county or the state or even nationwide right now. It's a huge problem and we need to address that with more capacity for that. We also need to look at the other elements of the system such as, say, residential treatment for substance use disorders. But here's the real big issue. is that Salt Lake County right now for residential treatment for substance use has about 680 to 700 beds available. The next biggest county is Utah County in the state. Their capacity is roughly this. They've got less than 40 beds in that county. And if we go to Davis or Weber County, they've got even fewer beds than that. So you can see where if you need residential substance use treatment, you might be able to find some where you live, but you may have to come to Salt Lake County, which means even more capacity problems in Salt Lake County. This happens across the board. If you need shelter, you're probably going to have to come to one of a couple places in the state, and Salt Lake City or its close environs are probably where you're going to come. Shelter's here. That's where you come for shelter, right? When there's not enough capacity, everybody ends up in the same location struggling for the same resources. Now, the other thing that happens is, and when we talk about the lack of resources or all this sort of spillage, so to speak, this represents a lot of people. And when we ask our police department to enforce our laws, which they absolutely want to do and they should do, and they're trying to do, this is what it might feel like for them. Try and get him into shelter. I'm going to try and get him in anywhere I can. This is what it can feel like in trying to enforce laws when there's not enough capacity in the system. It's frustrating for everybody involved, and it doesn't work as efficiently as it needs to. Now, the public safety plan for Salt Lake City looks at all of these systems, even the ones that are not controlled by Salt Lake City itself, because they all have to work together for any of them to work, frankly. So the public safety plan talks about a number of things, including we need to increase the amount of affordable housing and the amount of deeply affordable and permanent supportive housing. We need more capacity, and the city spent a lot of money in the last few years on this end of the spectrum and will continue to do so. We also need to free up bed capacity in the residential treatment programs. That means we need more capacity here, and it flows into here. We also know we need more shelter availability. And the state of Utah has recently talked about a campus or an additional 1,200 beds of shelter in Salt Lake County to help meet the need. This would be a huge deal. And this would allow the jail, without even increasing its capacity, although they're working on that as well, to have viable options for people to go to. And people will keep moving through the system in healthy ways. This is what the public safety plan envisions, having capacity and coordination among all these systems to be most effective so that everybody has a place to be, so nobody ends up here on the street.